I just tried 3D resin printing for the first time, and boy was it interesting, but I unintentionally risked my life doing so. So grab yourself a cuppa and let's have a chat. What's up? I'm Jonathan and welcome to Maker Tales. This video is sponsored by Thang. Now onto my first print. For full disclosure, I sent an email to a whole bunch of resin printer manufacturers, and Elgu were kind enough to supply me with a Mars 2 Pro and their wash and cure station to get started in resin printing. But this video has nothing to do with the printer and all to do with resin printing results. But if you're interested in the future, once I feel like I've got to grips with resin printing, I will be reviewing it. I would like to think that as I put in so much research into my resin printing setup, that this is the reason why my first print and cleanup went off without a hitch. As is customary, I printed off the Rook torture test and just wow, I knew resin printing was high fidelity, but my expectations were definitely surpassed. After countless hours of research and having seen hundreds of models online, with it actually in my hands, I was blown away that you cannot see or feel any layer lines at all. In fact, the only thing I see and very slightly feel are these horizontal lines, which are the individual pixels themselves, and these things are tiny. Here is a needle to put this all into perspective. Okay, now I know. This is the Rook torture test, which is basically made to look the best and not fail from the manufacturer themselves. So I straight away put something else of my own to print. Now hold on, before we get to that, I've gone through a whole journey to get to this point. So let's rewind this back. As I'm sure you can tell from the title of this video, resin printing was, and still sort of is, completely new to me. Now this video will contain hints and tips of getting started with resin printing, but it is by no means a how-to or a tutorial at all. Those videos will be coming in the future, but this video is all about truly documenting my first steps into resin printing. So as I'm sure you can guess, I've been more of an FDM sort of guy for quite a while, for about 7-ish years, but out of nowhere for a while, I've been thinking that I really should be giving resin printing a go. Now, my first initial thoughts were pretty much how hard can it be? 90% of the things that are printed in resin are miniatures, and just sort of a general wow at how cheap resin printing has gotten. Then I did some research. And I'm sure for those of you that know Maker Tales know that I don't do just a little research. 1 month in and probably 200 hours of research down the line, I realized this is a much bigger apple than I thought I was biting into. On a very top and superficial level, these are the key things that I initially learned. We all know resin is toxic, but nobody really knows how toxic is because research is still ongoing. But I'm going to be erring on the safe side. As no surprise to anyone, resin printing removes almost all the limitations of FDM printing, but adds a whole host of others. The mechanical side is the easiest part of it all. Unlike FDM printing, the slicer settings are pretty key. The model orientation and support generation will probably be the bane of it all. You can't just set up a resin printer anywhere. And lastly, cleaning, and more cleaning. So with all that and a whole bunch more learned, I made a decision. If I'm going to start resin printing, I'm really going to get into resin printing. 1, so I can get good results, and 2, so I can help others who are already into resin printing or looking into resin printing. My first key thing to tackle here was location, because you really cannot do resin printing just anywhere. It's a little bit of a messy and quite smelly process at times, not to mention the toxicity of it all. So really don't do this in a office, bedroom, or heaven forbid, a kitchen. This really needs a space to rule over. For me, it was my workshop, but that was in no state to be a clean space. So I did a little bit of VR within Blender to redesign it all in my last video. Now, more crucially, this was important for one key reason. Temperature. You see, resin printing is a chemical reaction, so temperature plays a pretty big role. In fact, in my research, the root problem for the majority of resin failed prints was the temperature in some way or another. Because, as you can imagine, a space that is out the way is exactly that. A garage, a shed, a basement, and these spaces are usually not heated. and resin manufacturers even tell us that the recommended temperature is between 20 and 25 degrees Celsius. Now, I'm not saying this is where all the problems lie, but it definitely does play its role, because it influences the resin's overall viscosity as well as the curing time, so that then changes how well it sticks to the build plate as well as the printing settings. So definitely keep that in mind. Now, with the location sorted, I want to very quickly touch on safety and cleaning. I'm sure I'll cover this in a lot more detail in the future, but just be aware that this stuff is toxic. Be it normal resin or eco resin, it's not nice stuff and will eventually lead to chemical sensitivity and burns if it consistently touches your skin, lungs, or anything really. So keep things clean and be meticulous of what and where you touch when you're cleaning prints. Personally, I use an organic vapor respirator and I have an activated carbon filter in my clean shop. Speaking of cleaning, the majority of resins promote using isopropyl alcohol to clean off excess resin, and that is exactly what I did. Now, there are alternatives out there which in my limited opinion are much better because you don't run the risk of blowing yourself up. And now I wish I took my research into these alternatives a lot more seriously. But as I wanted to save a few bucks, I went with isopropyl alcohol. And that there is where I went wrong. After finishing my first large-ish print and cleaning everything off, I had my respirator on and had no idea of the huge buildup of isopropyl alcohol vapor in the air. And by pure chance, there was no sparks or auto-ignition hotspots in my clean shop. If not, the whole space would have gone boom with me in it. So I would maybe suggest looking into some alternatives, like some industrial degreasers like Mean Green or Simple Green, which is exactly what I'm going to do. And I'll be sure to test and show you my results in the future. Now, a quick word from Thangs. Thangs is a community for all kinds of 3D enthusiasts, and they have a selection of over 3.4 million free models to download. They are constantly updating and improving, and recently have added a whole bunch of updates, like full hashtag support and a super simple way of collaborating and sharing models or entire folders privately with others. Be sure to check Thangs out by using the link in the description. And by using that link, you're not only just checking out the fastest growing 3D community, but you're helping me make more videos like these. And for that, thank you. Now, let's go back to putting on my own first prints. A few weeks back, I did a deep dive into photogrammetry where I made this little guy. Now, I wanted to see this in resin to see if there were any real differences in the results. It was pretty simple, just chucked it into the slicer, used some pretty default settings, and I had another successful print. Side by side, the differences between the two are pretty clear. The key place I noticed the difference is in the face of the hair, as this is where I got the most detail from my photogrammetry. Now, feeling a little more confident, I wanted to really push the boundaries, both in definition and to the point of failure. A little haphazardly, I created my own real torture test that I would have never have hoped to have printed on an FDM printer, and also grabbed a bunch of Scan the World models along with a Cthulhu ring. I chucked these all into the slicer, used again some pretty default support structure generation, put it onto the print, and lo and behold, it didn't fail. I'm sure you can see by these results that detail is just not a problem in my opinion when it comes to resin printing. It really is unreal. Again, in these shots, you'll sometimes see a needle and my pinky just for context. Now, putting aside the toxicity and the somewhat frustrating workflow of resin printing, which I'm sure I'll get more comfortable with in time as I've made all the accommodations for it, the only real downside I see is material strength. But even then, resins are constantly under development, with tougher ones, flexible ones, even glow in the dark. There's always a new resin coming out, it feels like. And these are all liquid resins, which probably against the manufacturer's recommendations, we can mix and match to create our own resins with their own unique properties. So at the end of the day, I'm not fully convinced, but I am slowly turning into a fan. It's still early days and I have a lot more testing, playing about and learning to do. But it's definitely starting to look like this is going to become a staple maker tool. Now, with that said, I feel that comparing FDM to resin printing is sort of like comparing scissors to a knife. They both do the same thing and both excel in different areas depending on your needs. However, bringing it back to printers, the resin workflow is a very tough pill to swallow. But if you're willing to meet the space, the safety, and the cleanliness accommodations, I personally feel that the overall resolution outcome outweighs those headaches. Anyway, that there are my 2 cents on my first time trying out resin printing. I would love to hear your thoughts though. Do you want to do resin printing? Do you have a resin printer? Is it all just too much of a headache for you? I would love to hear it down in the comments or over in the Discord. A huge thank you to my patrons. You guys are absolutely awesome, and it's the reason that I'm able to make videos like these thanks to your support. And if you're enjoying what I make here and you think I'm worthy of your support, I would love to see you there too. Don't forget that we do have that Discord channel, and that's linked down in the description. Thank you for watching, keep making, and let the quest continue.